We're sitting here on a rainy afternoon in Dover, Delaware, and it's going to be a great pleasure for me in the next 25 or 30 minutes to sit and have a conversation with a longtime friend of mine, Audrey Hill. Audrey is a 40-year member of the college admissions counseling profession. She's served in 4 different high schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, and she's now a professor and transfer counselor at Montgomery College in Montgomery County, Maryland. Audrey, welcome. We're looking forward to our talk. Audrey, you shared some really interesting stories with us yesterday in a panel that we did together, and I wish you would go back over a little bit of that ground and talk with us about the educational process you went through school into college, how you wound up in the college that you did, and what were some of the influences on you. I just thought that story was amazing, and I hope you share it with the folks who have a chance to watch this conversation.
I'll be more than happy to. I'm Audrey Hill. I'm currently at Montgomery College in Germantown, Maryland, which is a community college. But my education as a child I valued, and I know it made me the person I am today. I went from kindergarten through 6th grade at an elementary school in Montgomery County, Maryland. And kindergarten through 6th grade in Montgomery County, Maryland, we were in segregated schools. My class, my 6th grade class, was the first class to be integrated into Montgomery County in Rockville proper schools. And so when we were in 3rd grade, we were told by our teachers, you have 3 years to go before you go to integration, and you've got to know certain information. We got to 4th grade, we were told we had 2 years to go. So when we finally finished 6th grade, we were very prepared to be integrated into our 7th grade class, going to our junior high. And I'll never forget, in 7th grade, and all the way through to 12th grade, we were in this integrated situation. But we came along during civil rights. From the time I was about 12, I can remember all of us being in walk-ins and prayer-ins, and we just always fought to sit on the front of the bus, to be in certain organizations. But we became strong people, even though I was only 12. And our parents, they were behind us at all times, also out there protesting. But when I got to 12th grade, I was one of those students. I was an athlete, and I loved everybody in school, and they loved me. As a matter of fact, I was picked as the superlative to be the most athletic senior girl that year. And I was the first African American to be picked to be most athletic senior girl. So my goal in life, I always wanted to be a teacher. And I didn't know until 7th grade that I wanted to be a physical education teacher. So when I got to 12th grade, I did my own college search. We had counselors, but the senior counselor, she never saw students of color, not to my knowledge. And I knew all the students of color in our school, and none of us can recall ever being called into the office to do any type of college planning. So I, on my own, went to the library and found these college books, and I looked up where physical education programs were. And I applied to 3 schools: Texas Southern University, Eastern Michigan University, and, I can't remember my third right now, but anyway, the other one was a predominantly white, Lycoming College in Pennsylvania. I was United Methodist, and that was United Methodist College. And I went in to meet with my counselor. I wrote away, had all of the applications. I filled them out in hand myself. My mother, who did days work, and my father, who worked for Montgomery County Public Schools as a building services worker at the time, we had money orders attached. We didn't have a checking account for the application fee. I'll never forget it. And I went into her, and she set me down, and she looked at me, and she said, "Oh, darling, you've done this yourself?" "Yes." She says, but 2 of these I cannot take because you can only apply to your own schools, meaning I could only apply to black colleges. Well, Texas Southern was one of them. I walked out of her office with tears in my eyes. I didn't cry in front of her, but the tears were building up. I felt so humiliated. I had no idea I couldn't apply to white colleges. No one ever said that to me. And the guidance secretary who was sitting there, who I told you I was loved by everybody, I had guardian angels, and she said to me, "What's wrong, Audrey?" And I told her. She said, "Come here." She took me in the back room, behind her desk, where there were nothing but file cabinets full of student records. She pulled my record, and she said, "I want you to copy," because at that time we had to copy and put our grades on a grade sheet by hand. She said, "I want you to copy everything on every one of those grade sheets, and I will make sure it gets signed." And this woman mailed those applications away for me.
That's a mentor of a different sort, or guardian angel. as
That's
you
correct.
said.
She was my guardian angel. And as it was, I was accepted to all 3 schools. But I ended up going to Morgan State College at the time, because Morgan State College, my mother, unbeknownst to me, did not want me to go away, and she applied with my pastor to Morgan State College. And I ended up going to Morgan and majoring in physical education, and I got my Bachelor of Science in Health, Physical Education, and Recreation. And I was going to do nothing but teach phys ed and coach the rest of my life. That was going to be my goal. I went to college on a golf scholarship. I was the only woman on the men's golf team. So I've been a competitor all my life. I started playing golf when I was 5, entered my first tournament when I was 9. So I have always been a competitor, but I played other sports as well. And it was always a challenge. So I was the only woman on a men's team. They gave me a hard way to go. So I've always been a person who has stood my ground, been a leader. I'm not a very argumentative kind of person. I always believe in inclusiveness and proving to people that things can be done regardless of race or gender or age. So I'm constantly trying to be inclusive of all kinds of people. When I started teaching physical education, of course, I coached and I loved the kids in phys ed, and started Special Olympics with a man who was the male phys ed teacher. We started Special Olympics in Montgomery County because we had a number of special ed students who we wanted to prove could participate, could compete. And so we contacted Mrs. Shriver, and she came to our little school in Montgomery County, and we had our first track meet. And that's where we started Special Olympics in Montgomery County, Maryland, in 1969. So I have always been out for all students. You know, I feel that students have always been my driving force, regardless whether I was teaching or going into counseling of some kind. Well, there was a counselor at this school where I worked, and she said, "The students love you. You know more about them than I do, and I want you to come in and meet with me every day, read their records." And I did that. And she said, "I think you should go into the counseling field."
One of the things that's always fascinated me about people, both on the secondary side and the college and university side in this profession, is how many different backgrounds we come from. And as we discovered last night, how many of us hadn't a clue early on in our education or our careers that we might be headed to work in this professional field. I mean, we've heard people from physical education, from music. There were many, many coaches that became guidance counselors in the secondary schools over the years. And on the admissions side, there have probably been more history majors among my colleagues in admissions than from any other discipline that I can think of over the years. Talk a little bit more about how your early move into the guidance side came about and how you came into contact with Potomac and Chesapeake ACAC initially.
Okay. Well, I took a year off from only taught 2 years, even though I was passionate about physical education. I only taught for 2 years, went back to graduate school to George Washington University, and I got my degree in a year. And when I graduated in May, I interviewed for a job at a high school in Montgomery County called Sherwood High School, and I was hired to be a counselor there. At that school, I would say was one of my first mentors. His name was Vince DiBiase, and Vince was the chair of the guidance department. I, being the youngest counselor hired, he sent me to all of the professional development activities. He encouraged me to go to conferences because he wanted me to bring back to the counseling department all of the information that I had gathered and gained to pass on to our counselors and to try to encourage them to come on and let's go, let's learn this together. And I would end up doing workshops for our department. Then I ended up doing it for the entire faculty because he felt it was important for the faculty and administration to know what counselors were doing in the counseling field that would be impactful to the school, to students, to the community. And so that's how I started. In 1982, he said to me, I want you to go to this conference called Potomac and Chesapeake Association for College Admissions Counselors. That was the name of it at that time. And it was being held at Canaan Valley in West Virginia.
The only time we've ever gone to West Virginia for our spring conference.
That's right. And so I was there, and I'll never forget, they had the closing membership meeting, and I sat on the front row, and they started talking about the college fair, the National College Fair, that at that time was held in Washington, D.C., and Montgomery County schools, we went to the college fair in D.C. at the time. We did not have our own. And one counselor stood up and said that he didn't think that colleges should support the fair in D.C. because they had had a fight, a terrible fight that fall, the fall before, and he was afraid for the safety of all students and of the college admissions professionals. Well, it really put a pit in my stomach because this is where my students from Montgomery County were going as well, and I wanted them to see college reps. But I knew that students in Washington, D.C. needed that fair as much as my kids. A lovely woman by the name of Marion Flagg stood up, who was from Washington, D.C., and she advocated on the part of her students in Washington and asked the counselors not cut down on coming to D.C. And then I stood up behind her, and I too advocated that all college admissions counselors should come back to that D.C. fair because Montgomery County students needed them as well. Well, I got home, and I was home back at work maybe a week, and I get a call from the president at that time, Jim Ballingy, who was going in as president. He was just president-elect. He was from Delaware. And he said, Audrey Hill, I need to talk to you. My name is Jim Ballingy, and he told me who he was, and I remember him from the conference. I would like for you to be chair of our Human Relations Committee. And I said to him, but I don't know anything about your organization. He said, it doesn't matter. I would like for you to try this. That was the start of my journey with PCACAC. I was Human Relations Chair for 3 years. I was then asked to be a high school delegate. In the meantime, though, Montgomery County decided to have their own National College Fair for juniors in the spring. I was the College Fair chairperson for our county for 3 years. And then I went from being a high school delegate. I served in the assembly, the National Assembly, as a teller. I served on the National Human Relations Committee, and we developed a wonderful program called PACT, P-A-C-T, Parents and Counselors Together. We felt it was time that college information be an early intervention tool, and so we set up this program for students who were in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But we found out that the information that was in this manual that could be duplicated for counselors was invaluable. And we found that a lot of high school counselors were using this for their high school students as well. So we developed a new program called PACT, and it is still going on. I'm so happy to know that it is still going on throughout this country and other territories. From there, after being on the national scene and working in as a teller at our national assemblies, I was asked to run for president of the national office, of the National Association, which I thought was rather, I was honored to be asked, but I didn't think I was ready. I mean, this was then 1996. Well, I had been in the association 14 years, but to me it seemed like just yesterday. I was still one of the younger members at that time of this association, and so I felt like, I don't know if I'm ready for this or not. But
Well, along the way there, of course, Bert Hudnall and Marty Wilder and you and I became presidents of Potomac and Chesapeake back to back to back to back. more
yes,
or
we
less.
did.
So there
That's
was-
right. I forgot. I missed that piece. How could I miss that? Because after being a delegate, and I was honored to be asked to be president of our regional, Potomac and Chesapeake. And to me, that probably was the highlight of my career in this association, because I got to plan the 25th anniversary conference as president-elect. I enjoyed that entire year planning that conference. I called more committees. I formed more committees. I had probably one of the largest planning committees ever, because I had people from all different walks of life, from all types of colleges. I had people who had been in the organization from its inception to people who were brand new. And I brought them all together around the table for this 25th anniversary.
And you did it all without the benefit of email.
No email. We only had landlines, no cell phones. We could call each other. And I had to write notes and mail them, and in 3 days knew that they had them. And sometimes I'd have to wait at least 3 or 4 days to get a note back from them. So we did all of this planning. It was phenomenal. A lot of people say to me today, it's probably one of the best conferences we've had in a long time, because we did different things. We thought outside of the box. We had a black and white ball for our social. People hear black and white ball, they think formal, but ours was a black and white ball. We had new counselors who didn't, young people who didn't have gowns, so it was a black and white. So if you wanted to wear a white t-shirt and black pants, you could. And then we went out and we had one admissions counselor who was a theater major, and she got us all theatrical masks. It was like a Mardi Gras. We had on masks, we had on beads, we had a live band, not a DJ. We had a band with instruments. They played all the latest music. And we learned a new dance that night, the electric slide.
And the master teacher, of course, was named Audrey Hill.
That's right. 400 or 500 people were all doing the electric slide at the same time. I felt like a Michael Jackson during the, whatever his video was. But we had the best time. And we gave everybody pins of the 25th anniversary, so that they would,
star-shaped pin with a tail to it.
With a tail
I still
to it.
have mine.
hoping that people would be, to let everybody know that they were stars and they were on their way. It was 1990, and I will never forget that experience. And the fact that the hotel where we were supposed to have it closed, and I had to scramble around to find a new hotel. That was so adventurous. I mean, I was exhausted, but I was so glad that we were able to find a place in Roanoke, Virginia. The Marriott is where we had it. And then, like you said, I moved on to the national level. In 1996, 6 years later, you're right. I was president-elect in 90 of PCACAC. 91, I was president, and in 92, I was past president.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 years later, went on to the national level.
One of the things that I believe gets overlooked all the time when people talk about high school counselors of us in ACAC, either state and regional or national level, are so focused on the one transition process from school to college that we forget, just as our general public forgets sometimes, that there's such a host of other things that a high school guidance counselor is responsible for in addition to the college-bound process.
Exactly.
Talk about some of the tensions that result for school counselors based on your experience in those 4 Montgomery County high schools where you've worked, and what can we do to help our membership deal with some of that?
I was in high school counseling for 34 years. Absolutely loved it. And probably, if I didn't have this opportunity to go to the community college, I would still be at the high school. But there are so many other issues that high school counselors have. It used to be we had times of year where we could get out of the building and do things. Now it's hard to even find a time of year to pull counselors together because they are so involved in national testing, state testing. They are involved in all kinds of meetings to deal with students with disability services. So we have meetings almost every week. They have meetings every week dealing with students who are special needs students. Not to mention, they are held accountable for meeting with every student in their caseload on doing some type of an educational plan. So every day for a high school counselor, and it can be different, not to mention all the crises that can occur. As you know, we have a lot of students who do have social issues within their families, divorces. We have students who are on drugs. We have kids who get killed in car accidents over a weekend. So there, not to mention all the crises, but every day is a different day in a counseling office in any high school. And that's not to mention trying to get kids into college, which is a big thing in Montgomery County, Maryland. We're one of the top counties in the nation on kids going to college. There are 24 high schools in Montgomery County, and now each high school has somewhere between 90 and 98% of their students go on to college. So you can see we're one of the top. So that pressure is there that all kids go to some type of post-secondary education. I'm kind of glad to see President Obama's initiative on college and careers by 2020, that all students should have some type of college or career planning in their lives. And I think Montgomery County has always tried to do that.
What is the average student load per counselor for someone working in Montgomery County at this point?
Okay, the average runs somewhere between 300 and 400 students, depending on the size of the school. Montgomery County has been very good about allocating the number of counselors per school. So if you have 2,100 students in a school, you usually have 7 counselors, 7 to 8 counselors. So they're very good about that.
But that would be regarded by many counselors other places around the country as a luxurious situation.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I have been being on the national scene. I got the opportunity to go around the country and visit with counselors in other high schools and colleges. I met a woman from Westchester High School in Los Angeles, California, Esther Hugo, and we used to call her Esther from Westchester. She was the only counselor for 2,400 students. And I'd say to her, how do you do this? And she says, I don't. But Esther was very, very smart and creative. She invited all colleges surrounding her to send in a counselor a week from their college or university. So she would have a counselor from a college for 7 days, and they would rotate. So she could end up having in her department at least 7 or 8 people a week to work with students. But yes, we in Montgomery County, it's a luxurious situation, but it isn't. When you think of 1 to 300, that's a lot. But it is luxurious to some who don't have that capability to have a lower caseload. And like I said, what you asked, what can be done? I think there needs to be more partnerships between colleges and high schools, so that students can have a seamless transition. And I know this is true in Montgomery County. A lot of colleges visit high schools. But you know what? We don't get to know, the counselors don't get to know each other on a personal basis. And so it's like, I'm there and I'm gone, and I'm there and I'm gone. And there's a high turnover in the college end, whereas there's not necessarily a high turnover on the high school end. But I don't care if that counselor is only there a year. I used to tell all my counselors in my departments, get to know that counselor. Get their card. When they go back, send them a note. Thanks for visiting. Because that starts the relationship. Pick up the phone and call them and say, you know, I have a student who's really interested, or is it possible this family can come and visit? Who do I contact? Get to know the people at the colleges. Get to know who your rep is at that college, because it's very important. That's how you build relationships. And that helps the students and the families that you're serving by knowing someone there.
Couple of final questions.
Yes.
You mentioned Potomac and Chesapeake's 25th anniversary conference as a memorable experience along the way. Is there another one that you can recall that just carries special meaning for you? And the second question, totally different direction. What do you think is perhaps the greatest challenge that's confronting our organization as we look down the road 5 years to our 50th anniversary and beyond?
Mm-hmm. You know, I always have stories. My first conference, you know, Potomac and Chesapeake was always very formal. And every year at our luncheon, we give a prestigious award called the Apperson Award. And I was Human Relations Chair, and I was asked to sit on the dais with all of the other chairs of the other committees, and for this luncheon. And sitting to my right was Joe Monty, and sitting to my left was this man I did not know. And they go on to proceed to give this Apperson Award. And that award is given to probably one of our most prestigious leaders of the time. And I turned to the man on my left and I said to him, who was this Apperson person and when did he die? Not knowing that I was speaking to Mr. Apperson. I was a brand new counselor. Well, that joke has gone on around this conference for a long time. Audrey knows Mr. Apperson. And he just said to me, well, Mr. Apperson, he was a good guy, but he's not dead. And I said, he's not dead? And he said, no, I'm sitting right here. And I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, this organization has always been one of those organizations where the members are very embracing and supportive of each other. And no matter what the challenge is that comes down the road for our profession, we seem to get together. We seem to work at that challenge as an organization, as individuals, and we seem to get through it. Now, some of the challenges I feel are coming up. Ever since I've been in this association, and since the early 70s, the challenge has always, the words have always been, we have changing demographics, and it's true. And still to this day, if you look at any report, the changing demographics, and now the economic challenges that are coming about. You know, we as an association, we have to, and we will, because you know we are counselors, we look at people. We have to work at those changing demographics. We have to look at where is our population going? How can we get students ready, regardless of their race, regardless of their economic situation? How can we get them prepared to be our next citizenry. How can we get them there? We want them to be good citizens. We want them to have wonderful careers. How do we prepare them? And we have to start early. If we don't start early, and we have to start working with families. That's our challenge. Families are not the same as they were years ago.
Parents
the unit,
and counselors
the,
together all
that's
over
right.
again.
The unit, the family unit is not what we think of as a family unit anymore. So a challenge is, how do we work with a family? How do we get to know a child well enough to know what that family situation is? So that we can work with that. Our goal is to get that child through the educational process with some type of a career goal, with some type of a career. We need to get them started. Now, our elementary colleagues are preparing them academically and talking about some careers. Middle school, they get very heavy on the career piece. They get heavy on the testing piece. They get heavy on the academic piece. When they reach high school, they are there. I mean, they're taking all the top classes, and then those who aren't doing well, those are the ones we've got to work with to get them prepared, because they too are going to be citizens of this country. So we've got to work with them on some type of a career goal. The community colleges are there, and that's where I am right now. Our mission is to work with the entire community. And that's where we're seeing a big chunk of the students come now because of economics and other reasons. And it is wonderful to actually counsel students and have them come out with an ed plan, whether they want to transfer to a four-year university, whether they want to go to a trade or technical program, whether they, want to go into the military. We are doing all that training right now in the community college. So we have a spectrum of different kinds of students. I was saying at my own community college, we have 168 different countries that we're dealing with of students. So yeah, how can we help? We have got to continue to support each other. Our college colleagues are going to have to start working with our elementary colleagues. I think another challenge for us is that we're losing college counselors, and we're losing counselors along the way. And how can we get people to stay in this profession a little longer rather than going on to other professions, or to get them interested? I have very few students who in 34 years came to me and said, I want to be a counselor. I want to be a teacher, but very few of them come and say, I want to be a counselor. Technology is changing all of that. And I say to kids, or they'll say, I want to go into social work. I said, what about counseling? Oh, I never thought of that. Since I've been to community college, I have had several students come and say, what do I have to do to get your kind of job? It really thrills me. My heart jumps to know that some people are looking at counseling and getting into this career. But we as educators have to be supportive of each other regardless of the spectrum. Now they're running tours at my college from the elementary schools. We get calls weekly to just come and tour the campus. And I think it's needed. At first I thought, this is too early. It's needed. They need to see what's there. They need to see what a professor is, what a counselor is.
Audrey Hill, thank you so much for sharing your stories and insights with us.
You're more than welcome, and I truly enjoy being a part of this legacy. I mean, we all are educators, bar none, and we've been educators for a long time. And I'm so glad to see that this project is coming to fruition.